Back in late November, Maine's Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife issued an unusual advisory to hunters, but it wasn't about anything that was being done illegally.
It was a warning to those who had bagged any deer in a specific area of central Maine about the possibility that the meat they harvest could contain toxic chemicals known as PFAS. Reports of PFAS chemicals in the environment are growing. And that's why the governor's supplemental budget, unveiled this week, earmarks nearly $9.5 million to address the contamination. As News Center Maine's Vivian Lee reports, that includes testing wildlife and game meat at a lab in Orono.
The push to establish a lab in Maine began after high levels of PFAS chemicals in deer meat were reported in late November. That prompted the state to issue a do not eat advisory for deer harvested from Fairfield and 5 surrounding communities considered hotspots for PFAS contamination. With no testing capability available in Maine, the samples were sent to a lab in Massachusetts before the hunting season got underway. Due to a backlog, those results were made public just as the season was winding down.
The meat was in their freezer, they were feeding it to their children, feeding it to their friends, and then they're told that they can't. And we can never put people in that position.
David Trahan is executive director of the Sportsmen's Alliance of Maine, which represents more than 30,000 sportsmen and women. He lobbied the Mills administration to allocate funding to establish a lab to test game meat and wildlife for PFAS. He says with more than 38,000 deer harvested last year, hunters need to know if their meat is safe to eat.
What we're talking about doing is educating, reducing exposure, and minimizing risk.
The governor's supplemental budget allocates more than $3 million to improve environmental laboratory testing capacity for PFAS, plus $750,000 for wildlife testing. Dr. James Dill is a pest management specialist at the University of Maine Cooperative Extension Diagnostic and Research Laboratory in Orono. He says the money could be used to buy additional equipment and technology to enhance testing already underway at UMO.
The chemical engineering at least has the equipment to test for PFAS. They have been testing for PFAS more in the environment, like soil, water, that type of thing.
Biologists from the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife plan to do more sampling of deer, turkey, and other wildlife before each season begins. Dill says the lab could sample more species of wildlife with expedited results.
You could do moose, bear, deer, birds, fish. Just as long as you got the protocols.
University of Maine officials say once the funding is approved, which could take place in the next few months, after that it will take at least 6 to 9 months to set up the lab with the right equipment and to hire staff. State biologists, meanwhile, are working with the Maine Department of Environmental Protection and the Maine CDC to pinpoint new locations to test wildlife. Vivian Lee, News Center, Maine.
More than $3 million in the supplemental budget is slated to support Maine farms and farmers who are dealing with PFAS contamination in their soil, water, livestock, and produce.
We will have more information on PFAS and the health concerns on our website and our News Center Maine app.